There have been two major patches since the last time I made a new tier list. Now we have new perks, two new characters, the Knight and Skull Merchant. So let's not waste any more time. I rated the characters for the average player that reaches the soft cap of MMR. Let's start with the worst characters in the game, who are either outdated or need power reworks. As long as the Trapper has no changes whatsoever, he will still be the worst character in the game. He is the character with the worst early game, as he has to take time setting up traps at the start of the match, and with traps spawning randomly all over the map, most of the times it will lead to one or two survivors completing generators, which is why corrupt intervention is a must on him. Those traps can be devastating in the late game or in a chase if you're lucky. However, if you get a single competent survivor, your match is over, as they will deactivate all your bear traps. Trapper is a M1 killer with nothing to help him during the chase, and his trap setup is very easy to disarm because there is no punishment for the survivors to interact with the traps, and there is no way for the Trapper to defend them from a distance. If any survivor is caught far away, they can easily escape with no repercussions besides revealing their position. An injured survivor can just keep running into traps and they won't even have deep wounds or get downed. Myers is in my opinion the most outdated character in DBD, and he suffers from power creep. His power is really cool conceptually and it fits Michael Myers perfectly, but the age is already showing for quite a while, especially with how his stalking mechanic works. The further away a survivor is, the slower your stalk level are. If there are more than 2 survivors, your stalking is not doubled, but instead it's the same speed. Also, Myers is the only character in the game that can end up without having a power, as his stalk meter can run out in the late game. The only good things about him are his extremely powerful Tombstone add-ons, or the Infinite Tier 3, which is still countered by Death Heart, one of the most used survivor perks. Also, it's cool how he is the only character with built-in passives, as he bolts windows faster and he has a smaller terror radius by default, which makes him have amazing perk synergies. However, as it stands now, there is one character that does everything Michael does, but way better. I find it funny how 2 of the biggest icons in horror were once some of the most powerful characters, and now they are at the bottom of the power tier list. Freddy Krueger is just an M1 character that can place traps that slow down a survivor only when they are asleep, but this is just a worse version of the clown's bottles, especially after the nerfs. He doesn't have a wide array of interesting add-ons, which makes him boring to play as in my opinion. If that was not enough, he suffers from one of the most mind-boggling design choices in the game. He is weak in the early game because he literally has no power, as he has to wait in order to teleport to a generator, and also all survivors start awake at the start of the match, so they are immune to his traps. Yet he is also completely losing his map mobility in the late game the more generators are done, so there is really no moment in the match where he stands out. The clown's power is very simple and noob friendly, and at the same time it has a lot of depth as proven by Arinat's amazing 143 pages long clone guide. But when you need a PhD in physics and chemistry in order to play this character correctly, is it really worth it? The clown excels at 1 vs 1 chases and looping, yet at the same time he has 0 map pressure, tracking and mobility, and all of those tools are essential in order to be strong. He suffers a lot from medkits, body blocking and Death Heart, all of them more popular than ever in the current meta, with no specific quirk in his power that allows him to counter those tactics like some of the killers higher in the list do. Also, the majority of clown players get countered by pre-dropping pallets and playing extremely safe, letting the other survivors finish up the generators while clown is wasting his time chasing. His saving grace in the past, which were the pinky finger add-on, got nerfed, so now it's way less common to see it, and it also requires 2 high-end add-ons, so it's not easy to spam in every match. He is also very map dependent, as maps with more pallets density give a trouble to the clown. The reason why he is below the C tier in my opinion is because he's the only M1 character who has no lethality, stealth, map mobility, map pressure, or game slowdown unlike the rest. From now on, We have characters that can be very strong but they are not consistent or have big downsides. Despite her very popular Condemned build, Sadako is still fundamentally an M1 killer that has the bonus of teleportation and stealth, which in reality is almost useless as survivors immediately know it's a Sadako by looking at the HUD, and you also have a directional lullaby that gives a heads up to the survivors even behind walls. The teleportation is very strong because the TVs are located near generators, so it's like having all Demogorgon portals preset from the start. Against really good survivors, it is very common to feel powerless as the only tool you have in chase is using your invisibility in a smart way, which can be fun when it works. However, just like with Clown, pre-dropping pallets, holding W, and overall playing in a safe way hinders Sadako's power by a lot. The moment you get survivors that know what they are doing, this character falls flat. For example, with survivors actually interacting with the TVs, removing your map pressure and mobility, or survivors that have Circle of Healing and medkits, which completely remove your pressure and chance to get an ambush. Her Condemned mechanic is completely pointless unless you focus on it actively, so it's not enough to be a worth slowdown. In fact, survivors can choose to ignore the TVs if they so desire, letting you teleport to the generators, because after all, again, you have no tools to help with looping besides stealthy ambushes. Sadako also depends on good perks a lot, more than the majority of characters. However, she has one positive that most characters in the game do not have, and that is the power to completely counter body blocking by being able to go to survivor collision while the manifested. The pig is the original N1 killer, that one character that you want to play if you don't want anything fancy. She's a jack of all trades as she has anti-loop, stealth, and game slowdown. However, nothing excels at their job, so she ends up being a master of none. And for that reason, she is C tier. You immediately know at the start of the game that you're playing against a pig since you can see the jigsaw boxes everywhere, and she has no slowdown at the start of the match either. So you cannot rely on that to defend your early game except with one specific add-on. She can potentially snowball in the mid-game if enough survivors have their traps on, and also she can tunnel a survivor and make their match miserable by preventing them from searching any boxes. But besides that specific case, the pig is overall not a very strong character. Her ambush dash is easily counterable by just leaving the loop, so most of the times you just use it to bait and uncrouch immediately. I still think she is slightly stronger than Sadako because her slowdown mechanic is better. The Legion is possibly one of the easiest characters to pick and play and also one of the most hated characters to go against. The reason being, Legion is not a strong character overall, but it is a very annoying one due to how their power works. With the Legion, you get the easiest first hit in the entire game as it's basically guaranteed, and once they attack a survivor, they get instant tracking on the rest. So the smartest counterplay is to spread out, and if a survivor team does that, then Legion literally cannot do anything with their power besides using it for map mobility. And since survivors are smarter than ever and more players know that you should spread out, this has led to Legions not being able to get the 5th hit as much as they could at the start of the rework. The mending mechanic is boring since it's not interactive at all. But here is where the single positive comes in. Due to the mending being so easy to inflict, Legion basically counters that hard, so that's a bonus even if they are an M1 character after getting that first hit. Just like with Clown, Sadako, or Pig, once survivors play smart and know how to loop, there is little you can do as a player in order to counter it besides trying to mind game. And while their power can help with slowing down the game, and with their fun and diverse add-on kit, it is currently not enough to compete at the higher levels. At least if you want to bore your enemies, then this is a good pick. At one point in the game, Wraith was one of the most lethal characters by far, but that time is long gone with the introduction of Circle of Healing and with medkits being so popular nowadays, which hurts the hit and run tactic that Wraith excelled at. Wraith has a very easy kit to pick and play as he has good stealth, constant mobility that can be improved with add-ons, and some anti-chase power as he can use the speed boost from uncloaking in order to catch survivors off guard, so that makes him a very common choice for new players. But on the higher levels, Wraith is very easy to counter, and compared to some of the characters in this list, he doesn't have any tools in order to help him against gen rushing or against survivors that know how to loop. The big problem especially comes from the fact that Wraith is one of the characters that gets completely countered by flashlights, as survivors can light burn you with this item, and also he has nothing to counter body blocking. At the same time, he is a very flexible character, as you can have a lot of perk synergies and a very solid add-on kit, so at the very least you can compensate for your weak spots with a good build. Trickster is one of the 3 problematic character designs in Dead by Daylight, which is what I call very weak characters who at the same time are very strong. And this leads to unfun gameplay for survivors and killers alike. In the case of Trickster, he is one of the most lethal characters in the entire game, as there are some places where there is literally no counter to him, like low wall loops or dead zones, and if he gets the chance to camp, he is the second most lethal character in camping, as there is nothing survivors can do to save a survivor when the Trickster decides to camp, especially in the end game. In fact, with the main event and in the basement, you can down both survivors very easily and fast. However, even if his chases end up lasting very short, he's still slow, 110% speed killer, which hurts his map mobility, and at the same time he has a lullaby which warns survivors from 40 meters away. His range attack is the worst one at range, as he has a lot of recoil that needs actual skill to hit from range, and in loops where there are high walls between him like jungle gyms or the shack, he is very weak, and a survivor can loop him for a long time. Also, he gets extremely countered by Death Heart, as it requires 6 extra knives for a Trickster in order to down a survivor if they time the Death Heart right, and if he gets a bad map like Mother's Dwelling, there is nothing he can do to counter it. So we have a very weird case of a killer that can be extremely deadly in some situations and at the same time extremely weak in some others. It's like there is no in between, and that's why I feel this character's power is poorly designed, because even though in some matches you might feel like a god that is hitting every knife, if you get good survivors that can punish your weaknesses and know what they are doing, then you end up powerless and with less speed than normal, so you can't even brute force pallets or defend at regen. The Knight is another character that I find with a problematic design. On some matches, the Knight will feel very powerless as his power incentivizes survivors to just leave loops and start running early, because that is literally the only counter his entire power has. If you're caught in a place with no exits, like a map corner, a dead zone, or in maps like the game or RPD, you are going down no matter your choice as a survivor, and that's what is problematic. The inability as a survivor of making a choice to escape. There is no dodging or juking, as the bots will take the most optimal path toward you, or at least most of the times if they don't get stuck. So for that reason, the only strong way to play Knight is to defend at regen from the start, because overall he is kinda weak, and with the current strong killer perks and his power, this is a very easy thing to do and compensate for. Now, after the mid-chapter buffs, I do have to say that Knight can hold his ground if you have enough skill and play him differently, more like a spirit by taking advantage of the long paths he can make and zoning survivors, and also take advantage of the multitasking power he offers. It still takes a long time in order to do so, and requires more effort than just playing a character from the S or A tier. What puts him above Trickster is that he is a 150% speed character, and he can also pressure various survivors at the same time. However, just like Trickster, Knight suffers from a good Death Heart play, as it's very easy to time with the minions. In my opinion, the Knight is a very complicated character to rank, because I could easily see him in B tier depending on some situations, but I have decided to rank him on C because he does not offer consistency. Either you absolutely brawl the match or you don't. So Behavior announced a balance change to this character, which made my video obsolete. However, after a lot of theorizing, I still think this placement is the maximum she can achieve. They have made her brown add-on base kit, so now a survivor with a claw trap is in trouble. And for every survivor tracked, you get a haste bonus up to 7%, which makes her a speedy looping character, which is nice. Overall, I think her 3 gen capabilities are hard, but not to the point you cannot do that anymore since Call of Brine and Overcharge still exist. This is definitely a healthy change, but I am unsure if this is an overall nerf or buff, as I have received mixed opinions about it. Regardless, I think we can compare her power to Clown, since his power is to gas survivors so they are slower, and speed the clown so they can catch up faster. Only Skull Merchant has exposed and kinda built in this solution. I will be making an entire video dedicated to her power, but my final thoughts is that she is still a flawed design, as proved by the countless amounts of changes that behavior has to do between the PTB and this next update. But I am glad that at the very least, behavior is aware of how poorly designed this character is. From now on, I think all of the characters are strong and balanced. Before I talk about the Doctor, I have to be honest. I have a massive negative bias towards him. With that out of the way, the Doctor has one of the best tracking powers in the game, as you can find a survivor with the press of a button, giving him a strong early game as he can find immersed survivors fast. He also has anti-loop powers, as he can use the zap in order to prevent survivors from vaulting or throwing pallets. However, that's where the problems begin. Survivors can just run away or play extremely safe by either not dropping pallets or by pre-dropping pallets and not allowing Doctor to try any cool mind games. You slow down considerably when using your power, so sometimes that can even be a detriment to yourself, so you cannot spam your power as it's completely useless. Doctor also has a type of slowdown with the tier 3 madness, but it's not as powerful as the others. Doctor can be very strong against newer players as they cannot hide from him, but on the higher level, Doctor's looping is bad, with the only saving grace being the discipline add-ons, which make him add-on dependent. Death Heart counters him, self-healing counters him hard, there is nothing much that he can do in the high levels. Ghostface is a very interesting character in my opinion, as he plays completely different to most of the characters in the game, as you don't want to be seen, and you have to play stealthy and mark survivors to 99%. This extreme lethality at the start of the match is an amazing asset for him, as he has very solid early game if he gets a down at the start, which thanks to his kit is something that is plausible. He could have been higher on the ranking if only healing and Death Heart weren't as strong perks as they are now. The downsides of Ghostface is that if you ignore his stealth and his stalking, he is really an M1 killer. The only cool mind game he can do is use walls in order to catch some survivors off guard, or also activate the undetectable during the chase. He has no map mobility and he doesn't have any pressure or slowdown besides the paranoia a stealth killer can give to the survivors. I think he has a high skill ceiling all things considered, because his power has some quirks and hidden mechanics that the pros take advantage of, and also his add-ons are pretty good overall. He got a new movie, so let's give him some extra cool points. Every single patch, every single day, Hillbilly seems to be getting worse and worse, not because of his power, not because of the overheating or the nerfs of his add-ons, but because of the map design. Every single map now contains some loops or collision problems that make this character feel miserable to play for the majority, and it hinders his true potential, as I think Hillbilly has one of the biggest skill ceilings in the entire game, and he is more hard to play than Nurse or Blight, or any of the characters in the game. He really has so many tricks that pro players like Sofarix do that make him interesting and lethal to play, and even play against. The problem is that, just like with the Clown, if you have to understand astrophysics and the law of thermodynamics in order to play him well, why not literally play any of the other characters higher in this list, which you can play on automatic mode while watching your favorite show on the other monitor. Dredge being so low in the ranking might be a surprise for a lot of people, but I think that out of all the characters in the game, Dredge is the one who got hurt the most the more popular they became. When Dredge first released, I ranked them higher as they felt strong, as now more survivors are aware of what to do while in Nightfall, and also more survivors are aware that you only have to lock one locker out of the two when they are close, which counters Dredge by a lot. As such, Dredge is not that strong anymore, and they might feel weaker than at release. Dredge has amazing map mobility that is hindered depending on the map, and it's really bad on some maps like the swamp. They have an anti-loop power that gets countered by just leaving, so it's not as strong as it used to be when survivors didn't know what to do to counter them. Also, they suffer from the twin syndrome, where they have two uncommon add-ons that are really strong and completely change the way Dredge plays, so it's an add-on dependent character. Finally, Deathheart really counters the Dredge because it's really an M1 character with a very telegraphed attack. Add to that a bunch of medkits, and Dredge can't do much to prevent survivors from healing and preventing him from earning Nightfall again. Demogorgon might be kinda low if you consider the numbers in this list, but I genuinely think that Demo is one of the most balanced characters in the entire game. He doesn't feel very weak or very strong to the point it's oppressive. He has an interesting kit that gives him map mobility, tracking, a little bit of slowdown if survivors decide to interact with the portals. He also has some stealth in his kit, and finally, an anti-loop power that allows him to turn safe loops into unsafe with a perfect usage. He has everything that a killer could have while not being too oppressive, and his add-ons are also cracked. The only reason he is now a little bit lower is due to how easy it is to counter Demo with a good Deathheart. Imagine a Hillbilly that doesn't have map mobility, but instead they ate the most insane tunneling and camping ability in the entire game, especially in the basement. Say hi to Bubba, who is exactly that. At the start of the match, he doesn't care about any Deathhearts as long as he downs with his power, which is easier to use compared to Hillbilly. Then, once he gets that first hook, if Bubba decides to play by proxy camping, there isn't much survivors can do. Another great benefit that Leatherface has is the ability to break down the resources of the survivors for the late game, by which point, with no pallets left, Leatherface becomes stronger and can end chases faster. The fact that staying uninjured against a Leatherface is not that big of a deal makes this character safer to use in the current meta. In fact, injured survivors can potentially be more annoying since they have access to Deathheart. If you get one survivor in the basement early game, you already won the match as long as you play it correctly. Just like Leatherface, Nemesis becomes stronger the longer the match advances, and he also might have one of the strongest anti-loop powers as there are so many loops where his whip is easy to hit. So in the 1v1 situation, he is very strong, especially on tier 2, where he is by far the best pallet shredder in the entire game. Add to that a bunch of AI helpers that can pressure generators from afar or give away the positions of the survivors, and you have the formula of a strong character. The only thing making him weak is that he has to hit 3 times against a healthy survivor in the early game, as well as he starts on tier 1, so he cannot break pallets immediately. And with Deathheart being so easy to time against him, he might as well hit 4 times in order to down someone. Those are huge risks that make him not reach the full strong potential that some of the other characters might have. Also, he has really bad add-ons, with only one add-on being worth it, that being Marvin's Blood. Most of you probably remember how Deathslinger was considered as just a weaker Huntress, and with the past nerfs to his quickshot abilities, he suffered a lot and fell down plenty of spots. Nowadays, with the massive popularity of Deathheart, Deathslinger is the perfect counter to that perk, as his power completely removes any opportunity for the survivor to use that perk. Deathslinger can make some safe loops into unsafe with the correct usage of his power, which leads to survivors spread-dropping pallets in order to counter him, and with his slow movement speed and lack of ability to give map pressure, on paper, he sounds weak. Deathslinger, however, is one of the strongest characters in the 1v1, way better than Clown or Trickster, and there is nothing you can do against him in chase. This lethality is the pressure he creates in a match, and also his power to simply camp and catch survivors trying to save off guard is very strong. He is the only ranged character in the entire game that doesn't suffer from the Deathheart buff. The only reason he is not in A tier for me is that he spent all of his points in chase, but none in map mobility or pressure, unlike the next characters. And now we have lethal characters that also have map mobility or pressure compared to the rest. The Hag is one of the oldest characters designs in the game, and in some ways she is very outdated compared to the rest. One of the outdated things about her is how she can just spam all of the traps to a hooked survivor, unlike any of the characters in the game. But ignoring her camping abilities, she still has the opportunity to have map control from anywhere in the map. The Hag has a great regen setup, as she forces everyone to play and not ignore her traps, and also she can set a web at the start of the match that can completely invalidate entire loops from the start. The reason why she is low compared to the rest of A tier characters is that she has a massive counter with flashlights, as they destroy her traps, and also a smart survivor activating all of her traps while she is busy carrying a survivor or busy defending a 3 generator setup. She can answer back by playing scummier, either by proxy camping or by not leaving the 3 gen. Also, for some reason the Franklin Spur combo with her is very slept on, which allows her to completely counter medkits and also get very easy downs by trapping and camping the items as well. The twins are the most underrated characters in DBD due to the fact that nobody plays her, and thus a weird misconception is created. They are weak. Well, not at all. The reason nobody plays the twins is because they have a lot of glitches, but most importantly, because they are slugging and camping monsters compared to the rest of the cases. The twins are the characters that can completely change an entire match in a single Victor usage, so survivors cannot feel safe until they leave the match through the exit gates, and this is literal. If Victor catches you in the exit gates, you will get hooked. Victor is basically a school merchant drone but on crack, as there is no way to ignore or bypass him, so if Charlotte is camping a generator or a hook, or even a hex totem like Devour, there isn't much you can do to prevent it. The more time has passed and the more survivors are starting to wake up and see that the Cenobite is actually a menace, especially with the latest changes that have occurred. Cenobite completely counters Dead Heart once you hit them with the chains, and completely counters off the record if you have one specific add-on, Original Pin. In fact, let's talk about his add-ons. And oh boy, Cenobite has a wide collection of pain and suffering that he can inflict to survivors. Having a secondary objective forced on survivors to interact with gives a lot of time for the Cenobite to defend the gens, and add in a hooked survivor, a box that needs to be solved, and 3 generators with Call of Brine and Overcharge, and you have the formula to one very annoying match that most survivors would rather DC. Cenobite takes a lot of skill due to how unique his gameplay is. You have to take into account a lot of things like the spawning mechanics of both the survivors and the boxes, and micromanage all of it if you want to stay on top. If played correctly, he is indeed one of the strongest characters in the game, even after all the nerfs that, in all honesty, were necessary. The Huntress has always been one of the strongest characters in the game due to one very unique thing that she offers: extreme lethality at range and to various survivors at the same time. If you are a good Huntress player and you get a nice and open map, survivors have to be careful constantly and take lines of sight seriously if they want to survive. The Huntress lethality is especially seen in unhooking situations, as she can camp from afar and down all of the survivors extremely fast by hitting the shots before they even have a chance to escape. The same happens with a good 3 gen situation, as she can pressure a generator from afar with enough skill, and this range lethality allows her to be extremely strong even with no need of map mobility. There are some loops that you are getting hit and you have no counter to it besides Dead Heart, but it all depends on reaction. Another very strong factor of the Huntress is her zoning potential. You have to take into account your movement as a survivor when you play against a Huntress, and you have to break line of sight as fast as possible. This way, Huntress players can just hold their charge hatchet and punish survivors taking the wrong decisions. In other words, her presence alone is enough pressure for the entire map, and her lethality to hit survivors with hatchets is very scary. Wesker is like a light version of the Nurse and the Blight, and this is especially true now that people have learned there are various techs you can do with Wesker in order to optimize his gameplay. He has a stronger map mobility than I thought, with his ability to dash across the map fast and recharge the power in time to use it in a loop, and also his secondary tool of dashing windows and pallets can make some very annoying loops for killers below this list way easier. The Ouroboros infection is nice, and while at first glance it doesn't look like much, survivors cannot simply ignore it because the hindered penalty is very strong on the long run, especially against a fast character like Wesker. He can hold 3 gens pretty well even if you're further away than usual, and his extended terror radius gives him access to some specific builds that can be very oppressive to survivors. Pyramid Head has always been one of the strongest killers in the game, all because of his ability to completely bypass survivors' perks and just straight up tunnel one character out of the match at the start, which he can still do even if tunneling now is easier than ever for the majority of characters. If you have enough skill, you can also use his punishment wave and completely deny some loops to survivors, as they have no other choice other than leaving or taking the hit. His trails are easy to ignore by simply leaving the loop, but sometimes the only choice is to tank them, and this leads to Pyramid Head being able to quickly eliminate a survivor of the match. The scary thing about this character is that he has an extremely strong base kit, in fact possibly the second strongest base kit in the entire game, meaning that you don't even need to use any add-ons at all. He doesn't have strong cracked add-ons besides the range ones, so imagine what will happen in a patch that reworks the add-ons for Pyramid Head. The Oni is an absolute menace and a superior version of Hillbilly, even if he is very limited in the early game. In fact, he is literally a powerless M1 killer until he gets the first hit, so if survivors are smart enough and play it extremely safe at the start, there isn't much Oni can do. The saving grace is that Oni has one of the strongest late game out of any character, and once he gets that first blood rush, he can easily down 2 survivors who can other, go back to the slugged survivor, get the blood orbs and repeat constantly until the game is over. When he has his blood fury on, he is extremely lethal and mobile, and even without the blood rush he kinda has a little bit of tracking thanks to the blood orbs. Death Heart can be very dangerous against him in blood fury, yet at the same time staying injured is not a smart option against Oni because it still gives him very good mobility, even better than Hillbilly or Wesker. A lot of people complain about the boring playstyle of the Knight and the School Merchant, but the Plague was the original 3 generator goddess, as it's extremely easy to have an entire match of injured survivors constantly, and with some add-ons, she can easily get Corrupt Purge in case the survivors are smart and decide not to cleanse. Plague completely counters the current healing meta, making a joke out of the puny boons and medkits that survivors bring into the match more than ever. She has one of the strongest 1 vs 1 powers whenever she has the Corrupt Purge, but with the bonus addition of being able to slug and go against another survivor at the same time, just like Huntress and Oni can do, or the power of camping like Boba or Trickster, since her vomit can bypass 2 survivors, the Unhooker and the Hook survivor. I am honestly happy at the fact that there aren't many Plague players, especially now with how strong medkits and Boon Circle of Healing are. Having an entire character that completely negates that part of the power helps a lot, and her 3-gen is really strong as it forces survivors to play safe while they are injured. The only counter I see to the Plague is a 4-stack survivor friends that are all coordinated and know what to do at any moment, but by that point I think they can easily defeat all of the characters below the list. For the average player, however, Plague is very strong, she just plays differently to everyone else. And now let's talk about the S tier characters, or the ones that everyone knows are really strong and can be used competitively. The Artist will always be S tier for me because of how cracked her kit is. She has infinite tracking, an amazing 3-gen setup, and no counter to her anti-loop besides leaving the loop or having another survivor help with a flashlight. However, it's true that more survivors now know that entering a locker removes the crows, which hurts her long-range snipes. I think Artist can do everything the C tier killers can do, and better. Also, her stronger add-ons are not game-changing, but they are very nice and easy to get, so you can use them always. The only big problem this character has is elevations, as 2 floor maps counter her crow power as she can no longer pressure the entire map from the same spot. That doesn't remove her ability to pressure 2 survivors at the same time, or control generators while she is chasing another survivor. This multitasking ability of hers makes her extremely strong and hard to counter. Everyone knows about the spirit and how broken she is, even after her nerfs. At the release of this video, there is still a glitch that makes her traversal sound muffled, so she is back at her pre-nerfed state. Only this time, she is even stronger because of her stronger add-ons with her mother-daughter ring or the cherry blossom very rare that allows her to literally see the killer instinct when she is close to a survivor. She has a very strong mobility and lethality in chase, as she can catch any survivors off guard, and for these reasons, she is and will be a top 3 character in Dead by Daylight. Not only is the Blight's power extremely good and highly mobile compared to the rest of characters, but he also benefits from being a 115% character, and basically every single one of his add-ons is really good, to the point that he has the best and most consistent add-ons out of all the characters, as they purely benefit his entire power the entire match. It's like taking performance enhancing supplements on an already cracked Olympian athlete. He becomes extremely lethal once you learn the intricate takes that this character offers, just like Lilith Omen constantly proves. Honestly, the main issue of Blight are the add-ons in my opinion, because I think the base kit is very well balanced, and he could one day fall to A tier if they decide to fix the techs which the devs have called unintended bugs in the past. And I think this is not a surprise to anyone watching. The nurse is and will always be the strongest character in the game because she can bypass walls, pallets and windows. She can hold a 3-gen extremely easy, but almost no match lasts that long. She has strong lethality by ending chases very fast as well. This is the only character that can have extremely long streaks without any add-ons even, or finish matches in an instant. Let me know what you think of this ranking, and if you would have ranked any other character in a different way. Remember that this is my subjective opinion. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.